The sound of tires crunching against the gravel disrupted the quiet evening air, as Julian Coleman, a 48-year-old man known for his calm demeanor and leadership skills, navigated his black sedan through the suburban streets of Charlotte, North Carolina. He had just finished a long yet fulfilling day meeting with community leaders, discussing initiatives to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the neighborhoods they served. Thoughts of his wife's famous pot roast waiting for him at home filled his mind, offering a small comfort after an exhausting schedule. But just as he settled into the drive, the piercing red and blue lights of a police cruiser flashed in his rearview mirror, cutting through the night like a warning siren. Julian's grip on the steering wheel tightened instinctively. A quick glance at the speedometer confirmed he was well within the limit, 29 miles per hour in a 35 zone. There were no broken taillights, no sudden lane changes, and certainly no violations that would warrant a traffic stop. Yet, as the siren blared, he signaled and slowly pulled over to the side of the road. "Stay calm," he muttered under his breath. He had been in similar situations before and knew the protocol. Hands visible, movements slow, demeanor respectful. Not because he had done anything wrong, but because experience had taught him that in moments like these, appearances could be everything. The officer approached his window briskly, shining a flashlight into the vehicle's dimly lit interior. Another officer stood by the rear bumper, hand resting on his holstered weapon, watching Julian with careful scrutiny. "You in a hurry tonight?" the first officer barked, his tone heavy with suspicion. "No, sir," Julian replied evenly, keeping his voice firm but respectful. "Just heading home." The beam of the flashlight hovered on Julian's face for a few seconds too long before sweeping over his console, then darting back to meet his gaze. "License and registration," the officer ordered, ignoring Julian's response. Julian moved slowly, narrating his actions to avoid any sudden movements. "I'm reaching for my registration now. My license is in my wallet. I'll retrieve it after this." The officer remained silent, his posture tense. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" the officer asked, though his tone suggested he had already made up his mind. Julian took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "With all due respect, sir, I don't. I was driving safely within my lane. If there's a concern, my dash cam should have recorded everything." The officer's expression darkened. "Dash cam, huh? That'll be confiscated for evidence. Step out of the vehicle." Julian blinked, surprised at how quickly the situation had escalated. "Is there a problem, officer?" "I'm fully complying." The officer's jaw tightened. "I said step out of the vehicle. Now." A sinking feeling settled in Julian's stomach. He unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door slowly, his hands raised in clear view. Before he could fully stand, the second officer grabbed his arm roughly, yanking him toward the patrol car. "Is this necessary?" Julian asked, his voice measured despite the growing unease. "Resisting, huh?" the first officer sneered. "You want to play that game? Fine by me." The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into his wrists, and Julian felt his patience being tested. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was profiling, plain and simple. As they shoved him into the back of the squad car, Julian caught glimpses of his neighbors peeking through their blinds, their silhouettes illuminated by the warm glow of porch lights. No one stepped outside. This was far from over. The patrol car rattled down the street, its interior suffocatingly silent. Julian sat stiffly in the back, his mind racing with thoughts of what had just unfolded. The officers in the front exchanged casual banter, as if they hadn't just wrongfully detained a man for no reason. The younger officer, Daniels, glanced back at Julian through the rearview mirror, a smirk tugging at his lips. "So, what's your story? Late-night drug run, or do you just like giving us a hard time?" Julian met his gaze unflinchingly. "I'm just a man trying to get home." "Yeah, sure," the stockier officer, Reed, scoffed. "Reckless drivers always have an excuse." Julian bit his tongue, knowing that arguing wouldn't help. He took a deep breath, mentally reviewing his rights. He knew the system, and he knew that at this moment, the odds were not in his favor. When they arrived at the precinct, the fluorescent lights cast a harsh glare over the holding area. Daniels removed Julian's cuffs with an almost mocking flourish. "Welcome to our humble abode. You're going to be here for a while." "Am I being charged?" Julian asked, rubbing his wrists. Reed smirked. "We'll let you know once we figure that out. Sit tight." Julian was led into a small, cold holding cell. The door clanged shut behind him, the echo lingering in the air. He sat on the metal bench, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. For years, he had dedicated himself to the pursuit of justice and fairness, and now, here he was, on the receiving end of the very abuse of power he had fought to dismantle. Outside the cell, the two officers leaned against a desk, flipping through Julian's documents. "Nothing out of the ordinary," Daniels muttered, almost disappointed. "Doesn't matter," Reed replied. "We'll find something. Guys like him always have skeletons in the closet." Julian heard every word. He remained seated, hands clasped, his posture unwavering. He wasn't angry. He was calculating. His patience would pay off soon enough. Hours passed. Other officers came and went, casting curious glances at the man in the cell. None seemed to recognize him, but that was expected. Julian had only been in his new position for 3 weeks. Finally, as dawn broke, footsteps approached. A stern-looking woman in uniform appeared before the cell, her badge reading Lieutenant Morgan. Unlike the others, she carried an air of professionalism. Her frown deepened as she reviewed Julian's file. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice laced with irritation. Daniels straightened. "Picked him up for reckless driving and resisting arrest." Morgan arched an eyebrow. "Reckless driving? Where's the evidence?" Reed shrugged. "We haven't processed it yet." Morgan's expression darkened. "You didn't review his dash cam?" "We didn't get to it yet," Daniels muttered. Morgan exhaled sharply. "Get it now, and Daniels, Reed, my office, now." As the officers slunk away, Julian knew the tide was turning. But this was just the beginning of their reckoning. The courtroom was packed. Word of the case had spread quickly, drawing local media and community members eager for justice. Julian sat at the defendant's table, his lawyer, Sandra Reyes, flipping through a thick folder of evidence. Across from them, Daniels and Reed sat with their department-appointed attorney. Daniels looked nervous, his foot tapping uncontrollably. Reed, on the other hand, attempted to maintain a smug facade, though his shifting posture betrayed his unease. As the prosecutor outlined the officer's version of events, Sandra barely suppressed a smirk. When it was her turn, she stood confidently. "Your Honor, the charges against my client are baseless and rooted in racial profiling. To prove this, I present video evidence that contradicts the officer's statements." The judge nodded. "Proceed." The courtroom fell silent as the dashcam footage played, revealing Julian's steady driving and the officer's unprovoked hostility. Gasps rippled through the audience as the footage captured Daniels muttering under his breath, "Another one of them causing trouble." When the lights came back on, Julian stood. "My name is Julian Coleman," he declared. "I am the chief of police of this city." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Daniels paled. Reed's smugness vanished. "This isn't just about me," Julian continued. "This is about accountability, and that starts today.